most of us have a set of thoughts and beliefs we think we can stand on. Sometimes we come to them by tradition, circumstances, logic, thought, handed down by our parents. Sometimes we see the beauty of a thing and then search to understand it. I think that's the best way, and it doesn't always work that way, but I was seeking that as I dealt with my faith and my beliefs about God. And I want to share my personal beliefs with you. This is my creed. Now, I was thinking of reading it as a original but very organized and precisely spoken thing. And, I really don't work like that. I'm going to stop talking about how I work. I'm just going to do what I do. So this is a description of my beliefs. And it's the set of thoughts and ideas that kind of describe how I function, how I view God. And some of the stuff I've researched. Some of the stuff I've acquired it from people who've done research, and I haven't checked it all. But I remember a day when I just believed stuff, and I didn't check anything. I just trusted the people. And I'm done with that. I've been burned too many times. What I understand and what I believe has changed a lot of times over my lifetime. I mean, it's really changed. Wow. I didn't think of learning independently until recently, and it happened because I started realizing that people don't know what they're teaching. A lot of times, even people who are preachers haven't examined what they believe. They learned it from someone else. They might have studied it in detail, but they didn't examine it. I grew up, as a child, I was an American Christian. I grew up in a sect of Christianity. In Sunday school, I learned that Christ was born on Christmas. Not true. Easter was a good thing. That's not commemorative of when Christ died. Sunday was the Sabbath. Not true. Jews are lost. Not true. Except, of course, Jesus was a good Jew. He wasn't lost. He gave up being Jewish. That's the way we view it. That's not true. There's a lot of things that I learned as a Christian that are just wrong. They are traditions. They're things that people taught, who were taught by other people, who were taught by other people, who were taught by other people, who learned it from someone, but it wasn't like the original people, like the disciples or the apostles. They learned it from John Calvin, Jonathan Edwards, Plutarch. I mean, stuff. Anyway. But I knew we were correct because we're American Christians and everything that we do in America is right, and especially if you're a Christian. Well, I went to college, and when I went to college after high school and young life and all the wonderful experiences I had there at church and going to camp, I went to college and I came across a new set of people who were zealous for the Lord. My campus youth group, the evangelical leaders I found there, they were covering the campus. We handed out pamphlets and booklets, posted flyers. I shared the 4 spiritual laws, door to door. Knock, knock, knock. Random guy opens the door. Do you know you're going to burn in hell unless you listen to what I say? I could have just said that. Skipped right to the part. I went out to save souls. I was a good disciple. I studied my Bible. I memorized verses. I humiliated myself for the sake of the gospel. I worked at being good. I prayed hard in the prayer closet. I guarded my heart against them hot girls. I would forsake the unbelievers except to draw them to Christ. I was always having pure motives. And my religion was all grace all the time for us, except when we had to do stuff to be good. Tried to make Jesus proud. That was my college. Then I marched into a law-loving, legalistic body. It was a church that we were like the true church, and we talked about being the true church. And we were the true church because we tried to obey God. We obeyed the law. We went back to the Old Testament and said, those those Christian people who were like these Baptists, they just blow off the law, but they're wrong because the law says you have to follow it. Yeah, we ignored a lot of verses. It's kind of interesting. We weren't like the pagan American Christians. We didn't ignore what God said we should be doing. We avoided unclean foods, and we kept the holy days and obeyed the Sabbaths, and we tithed correctly like out the wazoo. We submitted the ritual, and we gained knowledge. It was obedience precedes understanding. So we just obeyed, and then eventually we're supposed to understand stuff. We knew the key to ending Satan's reign, saving the world, and being the saved. Preach the gospel, contribute to the work, obey the law, especially the signs of the holy days and what they meant. And we had to get people in the fold. At dinners we used to toast to the kingdom, and we knew that the kingdom was. And we were right, by the way. Well, kind of. But we planned to be there. I'm kind of giving you my background. Remember that. I'm just letting you know how many ways I've screwed up. Well, finally I joined a hard-praying, conservative, independent variety of evangelical American Christian sect. And we ministered to unchurched Americans and pagan internationals. And I said pagan because that's the way we viewed them. We did that in the hope of infiltrating the good news into closed homes and closed countries. We were a righteous group of people. Our group took 3 years to study the book of Romans. I mean, we really diced that thing up. And what's really cool, it was one of the best studies and sets of sermon series I've ever been through, especially after the legalistic church, because Romans is a lot of grace and understanding. But you know the crazy part was? It was then when I started noticing how the pastor would come right up to something and he'd get close to saying it, and it's like he just changed the verses. And I could tell that something was going on because Romans is really powerful for opening your eyes to God's grace. But he'd get right up to God's grace and then talk about what we had to do. It was all grace all the time. But those poor people who didn't know it was grace, they would die and burn forever. It was sad for them that God did not give them the faith to be saved. That's what we taught and believed. After that group, I attended different versions of that group, each gathered with a different market for a different emphasis in the message, literally a different gospel. There was ones that focused on family, on prayer, on tongues, on gifts, on service. We had American exceptionalism, it seemed like a doctrine. Zionism, it seemed like a doctrine. Legalism, even a derivative of these things that was big on guns and superheroes. There was a gaggle of preaching that was fit for helping everybody feel personally led and fed. And that's what it was about. My point in sharing this is to explain, to elucidate, to add to, and make sure you see why I just listened and believed what I was being taught. When my teachers and preachers and the pastors and the authors of the books and all these mature men of God who've gone to seminaries and been surrounded by other mature men and had years and years of study, they told me things about God, things that were written in the Bible. Well, despite the wild, raging contradictions and inconsistencies, both within and between the groups, I accepted what they said because of the wild, raging contradictions and the way they could so expertly explain them. It made me realize, wrongly, these people must know what they're doing. I could never come up with an explanation like that. Wow. I couldn't see how they did it logically, but they seemed to be at peace with it. It seemed like brain surgery or rocket science. The leaders, the teachers, the elders, they should know what's in the Bible. They should know what was in the book. They studied it in seminary. Some of them wrote translations. How How could I question them on things that felt and seemed obviously off in what they were saying? They'd been teaching congregations, directing Bible studies, leading small groups and congregations for years. They were the experts. They had multiple degrees, really. Some of them had multiple degrees. They were holy and separated by God for a great purpose, and not many people are called by God to be knowledgeable and glorious like they are they? I mean, really, that's what I thought. So when it didn't make sense, when I'm listening to these people and there's contradictions and things, I just said, well, I understood the limitations of rationality. Just because I didn't get something didn't mean it was wrong. It could just mean I wasn't mentally strong or mature or spiritual enough to get it. Right? So, all that to say, I accepted what I was taught and I pushed my feeble doubts to the side for years. There was obviously a big gap between what I knew and what they knew. Right? Then the world began to change. I was asked to lead some ministries. I had a few in the legalistic church. I led a couple of things, and I was given spiritual shepherding responsibilities, I guess you could say it that way. I was given a study to lead. I was given a couple more ministries to supervise. I was made a deacon. I was offered the opportunity to disciple a few people, which meant I'm supposed to know stuff. I still had my doubts about doctrines, but now I was meeting and conversing with other leaders who had doubts and questions about doctrines. They never voiced publicly, just hang around, they'd share stuff. My professional training made me attempt to reconcile the unresolved contradictions and the conflicts that I kept seeing in the system, but I couldn't resolve them. There's a lot of missing logic. I could do this if I wasn't logical. If I just stopped being logical when I went to church, I was fine. As long as I was trying to think, I had problems. They handed me a booklet or a brochure or a ministry program or guide, and outlined using my duties. I was supposed to use those items as lessons or guides for all the unknowing people of what I was. But the materials didn't make sense. At the core of the presentations, there's something wrong. What they were asking me to say was often inconsistent with something else that I had either taught, been taught, or learned at a prior time. When I asked for help with understanding this stuff, I was just told to pray and God would give me the faith. I thought it was the faith to believe. But it turned out in practice, they wanted me to have the faith to ignore the contradictions. The faith to step upon my own conscious objections. Yeah. Okay, so after a while I broke ranks. I was shown some tools, and I found I could actually read a Bible translation and learn from the words written there when the translations followed regular grammatical rules. I mean, I found Bibles that were well translated because they were consistent. And I used concordance and word study Bibles. It was really cool what I was taught. What I was taught was how to not depend on people to tell me things. But they could tell me stuff and I could check them. You know, most translations don't have a consistent rule. And since they were, like the King James was done before computers, so Fred in the room next door might have translated the word pause one way. No, skip pause. Let's go to, I'll leave pause. You might translate it one way, and then the next room, Harold translated it a different way. And there's no way for them to compare it, ever. So, words that God provided and worked over to pick were translated differently in different places, and so it changed what it meant because it didn't associate two ideas the way it should have. Anyway, I learned to learn from the scriptures instead of relying on the explanations of human beings. I could do this as long as I was willing to let go of the traditions, and this was a tough spot Things made sense in the scriptures and were logical when I let go of traditions. But you know what? The people around me weren't letting go of traditions, and so there's a lot of little headbutting. Just to throw in another couple of things, I applied the skills that I learned in researching scripture to like a lot of other things in life. I'd find basic source materials, and wow, things started making sense. And I've ruined my comfortable worldview by learning a lot of things that are true about politics, education, the monetary system, information sources, religion, well, everything. Like Alice going down the rabbit hole, I can't go back. So, anyway, for me, it has become a simple enough idea to just keep in mind that we do not battle against flesh and blood. Knowledge is a good starting point for the context of the truth, and that knowledge especially. We don't battle against flesh and blood. I have to be okay with looking stupid and being wrong. It's an ever-present reality when a person deals with truth. When I learn something that's true, if I don't believe it, I have to face the fact that I was wrong. And that's kind of hard, especially if I've said things about this untruth and shared it with other people. That's mea culpa, it's my bad. But understanding that I'm not battling against flesh and blood helps a lot. Understanding that the real battle has always been spiritual in all realms. That's become the starting point for seeing how wrong I've been able to do so many things. I start out being wrong, and then I become right, and then I'm wrong again. That's the cycle. Wrong, right, because you learn more. And every time you learn something, you didn't know it, and so you're wrong. Kind of a thing to think about. Nothing about truth is so important that you can't allow yourself to be wrong about it. I mean, you got to believe what you believe. You believe what you believe. But everything about truth is so important that you must be wrong about it sometime. Because you need to find the truth, and if you didn't have it, you will have been wrong, and you have to face that. So, anyway, back to the creed. Excuse me. I've taken general parts of this statement of belief from a group that I found very closely aligns to my beliefs. I've changed their statement a bit to fit my current thoughts. I haven't completed all my studies on all the topics, so there's some stuff I'm going to say that I believe because it's consistent and logical, but I haven't looked at all the verses to support it yet. I found this group to be consistent and concordant with all the scriptures that I've read that they've done so far. They have a few things that are a little off, but compared to every other Bible, they're doing a really good job. It's called the Concordant Publishing Concern. You can just Google that. Concordant Publishing Concern. Concern. It's been a good place, among others, to learn more about God in a clear scriptural way. I haven't researched everything, but I haven't come across anything that they've said that really smacks against what I believe. And I mean what I believe from reading and studying. I found no other body of people that have gathered in and encapsulated what I've learned, as well as offering more that I can study and test for truth. And I can do this independent of human control. I can do this on my own. I don't have to have anybody else around. So, they have lots of good stuff. Well, I don't have to explain away any verses or ignore any clear scriptures when they don't fit my theology. I change my theology to match what I read in a good, methodic, consistent translation. So I'm going to steal the creed from the Concordant Publishing Concern and modify it a bit. But then, everyone I know who calls upon God's name has some sort of creed that they've stolen from some group. The Methodists have a creed. A lot of people haven't read it, but they're Methodists. They say they believe in it, but they've never read it. Baptist, Seventh-day Adventists, they don't, most people don't know what they believe. They just belong to the church. And but church, what do you believe in your church? We believe in hell and salvation from Jesus. And that's about it. That's about all you can get out of them with any coherence that matches anything. But they even misunderstand that. Anyway, most people don't have the time or the inclination to do all the work to figure out what they really believe. I don't either. What I've found is I found people I trust. I listen to what they say. Okay, this sounds like everybody else. But then I dissect it. I take down verses. I write them. I research them. I look into it. And I've only done that with like 4 topics. But there's some people that really have it down that have opened my heart to see the truth of God and who God is. And it's affected me in some profoundly cool ways. If you want to grow up a whole bunch real fast, though, study human behavior and logical fallacy and how we get it wrong. It's very humbling. No, it's humiliating. It's a humiliating topic. You need to learn about some logic so you understand what you're doing wrong when you're studying, and that doesn't fix anything because all your understanding will come from God. So if you're not understanding it, sorry, it's not on me, it's not on you, it's on God. But anyway. So, in a minute, I'm going to start. Well, let me check my time here. Ooh, I don't want to make this too long. I'm going to stop at that point. This is my background. I'm going to make this a part A. Part A is just about how I ended up where I am about to give you the creed. Part B, I will give you my creed. Whatever creed means, what I believe about God. So, thanks a lot. You guys are awesome. Stay tuned or listen in for the next one for part B.